All right, here we go. Chapter 10. When Luke went down to supper, he saw that his mother had 2 loaves of bread out on the china plate she used for holidays and special occasions. Oh my God, china plate, china rabbit, Edward. She was showing off the bread the way she used to tape up the crooked drawings Matthew and Mark brought home from school when they were little. What is special about these 2 loaves of bread? Yeah, but where'd they come from? Yeah, Luke made them, right? So she's showing them off, like even though I think her and Dad might not agree on everything. You can kind of tell that. So I think she's kind of like showing off, like, look what he did today for us. But something had gone wrong. Maybe Luke had not used enough yeast, or he kneaded the dough too much or too little, and the loaves had turned out flat. They looked lopsided and pathetic in the center of the table. Luke wished Mother had just thrown them away. It's cold out now. Nobody noticed if you pulled the shades. Why can't I sit at the table with all of you? He asked when he reached the bottom of the stairs. Oh, Luke, Mother started. Someone might see your shadow through the shade, Dad said. They wouldn't know it was mine, Luke said. But there'd be 5. Someone might get suspicious, Mother said patiently. Luke, we're just trying to protect you. How about a big slice of your bread? There's cold beef and canned beans, too. Resignedly, Luke sat down on the stairs. Matthew asked about the auction Dad had gone to. I drove all the way there for nothing, Dad said disgustedly. I waited 4 hours for tractors to come up, and then I couldn't even afford the first bid. At least you got home in time to fix that back fence before dark, Mother said, cutting the bread. And yell at me, Luke thought bitterly. What's wrong with him? Nothing had changed, except maybe he'd seen a face that maybe belonged to someone like him. Matthew and Mark suddenly noticed the bread Mother was doling out. What's wrong with that? Mark asked. I'm sure it'll taste fine, Mother said. It's Luke's first try. Luke muttered, and my last. Too softly for anyone to hear, there were advantages to sitting on the other side of the room from everyone else. Luke made bread, Mark said incredulously. Yuck. Yeah, and I put special poison into one of the loaves that only affects 14-year-olds, Luke said. He pantomimed death. Pantomime means you act it out, so he was like sitting there like, that's what I pictured. Clutching his hands around his own neck. Hey, I was right. Letting his tongue hang out of his mouth. Oh my God, I was right. And lolling his head. Oh my God, I literally did exactly what it said. And lolling his head to the side. If you're nice to me, I'll tell you which loaf is safe. That shut Mark up, but earned Luke a frown from Mother. Luke felt strange about that joke anyway. Of course, he'd never poisoned anyone, but if something happened to Matthew or Mark, would Luke have to hide anymore? Would he be welcomed to public as the second son, free to go to town and to school and everywhere else Matthew and Mark went? Could his parents find some way to explain a new child, already 12 years old? It wasn't something Luke could ask. He felt guilty just thinking about it. Mark was making a big ceremony out of the bringing bread to his mouth. I'm not scared of you, he taunted, and took a big bite. He swallowed with great difficulty and pretended to gag. Water, water, quick! He gulped down half of his glass and glared at Luke. Tastes like poison, all right. Luke bit into his bread. It was dry and crumbly and tasteless, not like Mother's at all. And everybody knew it. Even Dad and Mother had pained expressions on their faces as they chewed. Dad finally pushed his slice away. That's okay, Luke, he said. I'm not sure I'd want any son of mine getting too good at baking anyhow. That's what a man gets married for. Matthew and Mark guffawed. Getting married soon, Luke? Mark teased. Sure, Luke said, struggling to sound as devil-may-care as Mark. But don't think I'd invite you to the wedding. He felt a cold, hard lump in his stomach that wasn't the bread. Of course, he'd never get married or do anything. He'd never leave the house. Mark switched to teasing Matthew, who evidently did have a girlfriend. Luke watched the rest of his family laughing. May I be excused? Luke asked. Everyone turned to him in surprise. Usually he was the last one to make that request. Mother often begged Matthew and Mark, can't you wait and talk to Luke a little bit longer? Done already? Mother asked. Not very hungry, Luke said. Mother gave him a worried look, but nodded anyway. Luke went to his room and climbed onto the stool by the back vents. In the dark, it was easier than ever to see into the houses of the new neighborhood. Their windows were lit up against the night. Some families were eating like his. He could see one set of 4 people around a dining room table, and one set of 3. Some families had their curtains or shades drawn, but sometimes the material was thin and you could still see shadows of the people inside. Only the Sports family had all their windows totally blocked, covered by heavy blinds. Wonder why. Yeah. Chapter 11. Luke watched the Sports family's house constantly after that. Before, he had just looked out the back vents in the early morning and late afternoons, when he knew people were about. But he'd seen that face at 2 o'clock. Maybe the other kid knew the rhymes of the neighborhood, too, and let his guard down only during the times he considered safe. For 3 long days, Luke saw nothing. Then on the 4th day, he was rewarded. One panel of one of the blinds on an upstairs window flipped quickly up and down at 11 o'clock. The 7th day, the blinds in the downstairs windows were left up in the morning. Luke saw a light go on and off at 9:07, 2 full hours after the last Sports family had left. A half hour later, the Sports family's mother drove in her red car and stomped into the house. 2 minutes later, the blind in the downstairs window went down. The mother left immediately. The 13th day was unseasonably warm, and Luke sweated in the attic. Some of the Sports family's windows were left open, though still covered by the blinds. The wind blew and the blinds back a couple times. Luke saw lights on in some of the rooms some of the time, and other rooms as the day wore on. Once he even saw the glow of a TV screen. He had no doubts anymore. Someone was hiding in the Sports family's house. The question was, what could he do about it? These chapters are short. We're still rolling. We're going to 12. We're actually going to do 12 and 13. Harvest came. What's harvest mean? Yes, and for a farmer, it's when they bring in all the crops, right? Matthew and Mark stayed out of school to help Dad bring in the crops in. The 3 of them working some days and dawn until midnight. Mother's factory got busier too, and she began working 2 or 3 hours overtime every day. She brought up a store of food for Luke's room so he wouldn't get hungry while they were all away. There, she said cheerfully, lining up boxes of crackers and bags of fruit. This way you won't even miss us. Her eyes begged him not to complain. Uh-huh, he said, trying to sound game. I'll be fine. He watched the Sports family's house, only sporadically now. What other proof did he need? What good did it do to him to know about the other 3rd child? What did he expect? The other kid would run out to the backyard and yell, "Hey, Luke, come out and play." He munched his solitary apples. He ate his crackers alone. And in spite of himself, a crazy idea grew in his mind, sprouting new details daily. What if he sneaked into the Sports family's house and met the other child? He could do it. It was possible, theoretically. He spent entire days plotting his route. He'd been hidden by the bushes and barns through much of his yard. It was only about 6 feet from there to the nearest tree in the Sports family's backyard. He could crawl on his stomach. Then he'd be hidden by a fence the Sports family shared with the Bird Brain family. All those birdhouses might actually help. After that, it was only 3 steps to the Sports family's house. They had a sliding glass door at the back, and on warm days they'd been leaving it open with just a screen. He could go in there. Would he dare? Of course he wouldn't, but still. The first time he looked out the vents and saw maple leaves shot through the shades of red and yellow, he panicked. He needed those leaves to hide him the way to the Sports family's house. If he waited too long, the leaves would be gone. He began waking up every morning in a cold sweat, thinking, maybe today. Do I dare? Just thinking about it made his stomach feel funny. It rained 3 days in a row in early October, and he was almost relieved because that meant He wouldn't go on those days. Didn't even have to think about it. He couldn't risk leaving footprints in the mud. And Dad and Matthew and Mark were in the way, hanging around the house and the barn, grumbling because they couldn't get into the fields. Finally, the rain stopped and the fields dried up, and Dad and Matthew and Mark went back to their combine and tractors, acres away from the house. The backyard and the Sports family's backyard were dry too, and it was warm again. The Sports family left their sliding glass door open. The rain hadn't knocked all the leaves off the back trees yet, but the next rain probably would. On the third morning after the rain, Luke's stomach churned as he sat on his perch waiting, watching the neighborhood empty out. He knew without question that today was the day he'd have to go, if he ever intended to. He couldn't wait until spring. He wouldn't be able to stand it. He watched 28 people leave in 8 cars and 1 school bus. Hands trembling, he made scratches on the wall again and recounted once, twice, 3 times. 28, yes. 28, yes. 28, the magic number. He could hear the blood pounding in his ears. He moved in a daze, off his perch, down the stairs, into the kitchen, and then out the back door. All right, last one, 13. No way he does it. I think he chickens out and comes back. He had forgotten what fresh air felt like, filling his nostrils and lungs. It felt good. With his back pressed against the house, he stood still for a moment, just breathing. All the months he'd spent inside suddenly seemed like a dream. He'd been like some confused animal hibernating during nice weather. The last real thing that happened to him was being called inside when the woods were coming down. Real life was outdoors. But so was danger, and the longer he stayed out, the greater the danger. He forced himself down into a crouch and half crawled, half ran alongside the house and the hedges in the barn. At the back edge of the barn, he hesitated, staring into the seemingly endless gulf between the barn and the trees at the boundary between the backyard and the Sports families. Everybody's gone, he told himself. There's not a soul around to see you. Still, he waited, staring at the blades of grass just beyond his feet. He'd been taught all of his life to fear open spaces like the one in front of him. It faced dozens of windows. He'd never stepped foot in any place that public, even if it was deserted. Still hidden by the barn, he made himself inch his foot forward. Then he drew it back. He turned around and looked at the family's house, so safe and secure, his sanctuary. He heard his mother's voice in his head. Luke, inside, now. It seemed so real. He remembered something he'd read in one of the old books in the attic about telepathy. Telepathy. How do you say that?
Telepathy.
I know it sounds weird, doesn't it? Like, I know it's telepathic, but telepathy?
No, telepathy.
That's the word, right? Yeah, telepathy. Where you can read people's minds, right? Supposedly, if people really loved you, they could call out to you from miles away if you were in danger. He should go back. He'd be safe there. He took a deep breath, looking forward toward the Sports family's house, and then back again toward his own. He thought about returning home, trudging up the worn stairs, going back to his familiar room and walls he stared at every day. Suddenly, he hated his house. It wasn't a sanctuary. It was a prison. Look, that reminds me of Ivan. I know exactly what I thought of. There's a connection. Before he had time to think again, he pushed himself off into a sprint, recklessly streaking across the grass. He didn't even stop to hide at any trees. He ran right to the Sports family's door and tugged on the screen. It was locked. Bro. All right. I cannot believe he actually left the house. I did not think he was going to. But still, like you said, man, you got to get out, right?